Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Sacred Sisterhood podcast. My name is Mary Wright. I am your show host, and it's been a minute. I've very much been in my own healing, clearing, plunge into the underworld, massive revelations, really refining my beliefs, refining my message, really getting back to basics, simplifying things, because everything around me was starting to become too noisy, too overcomplicated, and too overstimulating. So I really had to pull back and retreat into myself to give myself the time and space that my body and my nervous system was asking me to do. And in this incubatory period that I've been, huge revelations have come through. So I don't really know exactly what's going to come through on this episode, but we're just going to riff. We're going to see, what wants to speak through. So one of my biggest revelations in this time, and I just have to preface, just take whatever resonates and leave the rest. I personally have very much been unhooking myself from other people's teachings, old mentors that I've worked with, so I could really refine what feels resonant and not. So if there's things in here that just don't feel resonant, you don't have to buy into whatever my belief system is. You get to choose what feels good to you and what you want to plug and play into your belief system and what you want to let go of. That is your free will. That is your sovereign right. And so I just really want to encourage you to exercise discernment when you are taking in other people's content and messages. So basically where I've been is I've been in a huge spiritual ego death, and everything in the new age of spirituality just all of a sudden felt ick. It didn't feel right in my body. Posts that I had written the day before all of a sudden just didn't feel good. Words that I was using, these hot words that we use in spirituality in the online spiritual world, all of a sudden just weren't feeling good. And it was really I want to say upsetting. It was really upsetting to me to all of a sudden just feel like this whole world that I've created for myself no longer feels good. And I'm not talking about my physical reality, but more so stuff within my business, the internet world that I have been plugged into, my spiritual beliefs and so forth. So basically I've gone into a huge spiritual death, where I recognize that there was a huge disconnect within me around divine union, around my connection to God. And though I would speak about source and the divine and creator and spirit, and though I've done my own healing work around forgiving, religious upbringing and oppression, there was something within me that still hadn't fully clicked about my realization of God. And so when I reclaimed this word and reclaimed this connection, which all kind of came through for me early January, was that I realized how alone and unsafe I felt. And it's because there was a disconnect to the Father. Though I had done so much work around the divine feminine, the mother, and I had done lots of work around unpacking the divine masculine, there was something that was missing around the Father and around God itself. And so when I kind of realized that there was this spark within me that I hadn't fully tuned into, as that God spark completely erupted through my being, all of a sudden everything around me just didn't feel resonant. And so I had to be willing to walk through this fire of initiation and hand it all over. I pretty much stopped creating in my business. I really pulled myself off social media. I stopped taking in other people's content and just allowed myself to be in this void and sit with God. I wasn't calling in Isis and Osiris or any of my spiritual team. I was just sitting with God and just allowing this energy to pretty much dissolve anything that, actually, let's be honest, dissolve everything. And in doing so, there was a huge grief a huge grief that I was experiencing. And also my mind wanted to run rampant about like, well, what about this? And what about this? And like, what about the divine masculine, divine feminine, and all these things? And what about these people that are talking about hijacking and all sorts of things about in the new earth, or the new age spiritual community and da 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 da. My mind wanted to like grasp and figure all these things out. And the only sense of safety I could find is when I would calm down into my heart and just sit with God. So after like a few weeks of really just being in that space and allowing what wanted to release and just, yeah, be in this stillness and just be with God, I got to this point that like, it's like I was refining and blasting out all these other people's teachings out of my field so I could really get to my own unique soul signature, my own unique blueprint. Like refine, like getting down to the diamond, like a diamond in the rough. You know, I think a diamond is made from carbon being pressed together. I might be wrong. I am not a geologist or a scientist. But it felt very much like I was coming to my own inner diamond. In order for my message to clarify, refine, and so that I could be expressing my own unique soul signature, my own unique soul frequency with the world. And so from that place, after I went through this void, then it's like in the very center of my grid, I'm plugged into what I see as like the God socket, where like God is everything around me, God is within me, and God is like supercharging me and providing for me and loving me and providing safety. And then my feelers, like my tentacles, are like kind of beginning to web out and feel, okay, what feels resonant with me now? Because for like that those few weeks, everything didn't feel good. Divine feminine, divine masculine, new earth, codes, frequencies, everything. I even was like getting weird about my higher self. Like that's kind of this level of ego death or spiritual ego death that I was in. Excuse me. So then I started to put out my feelers. I'm like, okay, yeah, higher self, that feels good again. I'm going to call in my higher self. After a few days, okay, divine masculine, divine feminine, that feels good again. I'm going to call that in. So I've been kind of just, it's like I've allowed myself to destruct to nothing. And now I'm rebuilding. Now I'm in my rising. Now I'm gaining so much more clarity, and I feel so much more refined to my own unique belief system, my own unique messaging. And so you may be experiencing something similar. Maybe you've already gone through something similar, is you recognize that you're putting too much of your energy into taking in everybody else's stuff, and it was mudding your own clarity. It was mudding your own messaging. And so if you're kind of experiencing something similar, I encourage you to unplug from everything and allow it all to dissolve away. And once you get to that point where it's like, okay, I know my truth, now we can rebuild. I know who I am, now we can rebuild. And it's a very, very humbling experience. It's like this huge spiritual ego death where, yeah, just anything that no longer serves blasts away. And I think that this is I feel that this is very much in alignment with all of these higher frequencies that we're operating in, is that we're really seeing and feeling and experiencing the multidimensionality of it all. And so for a while there, I was getting super tripped up about like, okay, well, what about all of these people that are talking about all of these like hijacked grids, et cetera, in the spiritual community? And it always, like, when I would read those people's content, it would just grab my solar plexus and like churn my stomach. And I would get really heady about it, like trying to like figure it all out. And so as I've been unpacking this, and I've been working very closely with a dear friend who has experienced something quite similar a little bit before me. And so she was very much able to kind of like show me and guide me through the process, because it is quite emotionally charging and triggering to all of a sudden just feel like nothing resonates. And so what we've kind of come to understand, it's like we're shedding duality. And this is very much the way, because we're operating at such high frequencies now, we can't just put things into the box. Like, okay, these people are Christian, these people are religious, these people are new age, and talking about all the hijacking. It's hard to just put all these labels on because that confines, that like puts these boundaries and doesn't give any room for fluidity and expansion and non-duality, right? And this is kind of the way that we're moving forward, is we're not going to be operating from a place of duality anymore, where we're like throwing judgments around and saying, well, these people view it as this and that's wrong and da 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 da. It's more so, it's like we're in an ocean of beliefs, and in this ocean of beliefs, there's people that are very like, okay, they are very in the religious aspect. They're very much like in the Christianity aspect. There's people that are very in the new age, in the woo, and then there's people that kind of like bob and weave back and forth between the two, where it's like they don't really fit in either anymore. And it's like they're kind of, I want to say walking the line, but I don't want to say that they're walking the line at the same time, because then that's like creating this separation. And so I'm really understanding that the people that are talking about all of the hijack stuff and da 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 da, though it doesn't feel good in my body and it really just doesn't resonate, I'm recognizing that that's just not the pond that I play in. And that's why my body has such a huge response to it, that like my body's like, no, that does not resonate. That's not where you're at. That is where those people are at. That is where their work is at, to illuminate where there is distortions in the grids of reality that we operate in. That is where their work is, because they are like, them calling it out and observing it is bringing light to it, and bringing light to it is so that it can't be hiding in the shadows anymore. Just like when we're doing our own inner shadow work, when we illuminate something within our shadow, it doesn't have power over us anymore, because we're like, okay, I'm aware that that's there. That's cool. I'm aware of it now. And so I recognize that there's light workers that is their main focus, and that's perfect for where they're at in their journey and the work that their soul has agreed to do at this time. Then there's other people that are just like, all love and light, and let's not look at any of that like weird hijack black magic stuff. That doesn't exist. Da, 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 da. That's where their work is right now, right? And then there's people that are like, I've completely left New Age. I'm all about God. New Age just doesn't feel good anymore. It doesn't resonate anymore. God, 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 Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. That's it. That's the end all be all. And that's cool. That's where their work is right now. And so like through this kind of ego death, because I've witnessed my own mentors this past year go straight from New Age to, I want to say like ancient Christianity, like before the church was like a religious patriarchal structure. And they have pretty much like written off everything, all the work that they have done in the past. And as I was going through my spiritual ego death the last six weeks, I was kind of like, well, does that mean I have to let it all go, in a sense? Like, I'm not going to be doing priestess work. I'm not going to be doing moon circles anymore, da 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 da, because now I have this new understanding and connection with God. Like, what about all of this starseedy stuff, this witchy stuff? Like, and I was really feeling conflicted about it, because I love those things. I love the starseed stuff. I love chilling out with Isis and Osiris. I love, doing witchy kind of moon rituals. But in that void, I let it all go without like attaching to it, and with a sadness though, like, because there was a grief process. And as I came out of the void, I'm like, okay, am I going to be one of those people that are more like ancient Christianity, or am I going to be heading back into New Age woo stuff? And that's when my higher self is like, you don't need to put yourself in a box and be like you're one or the other. You're like a dolphin in the ocean, and there's all these different like ponds and like sectors of the ocean. And you get to kind of like flow around between whatever vibes with you for the day. But at the end of the day, your connection is God, your connection is source, your connection is spirit. And so you're fully plugged into that in the center, and then your tentacles can kind of like, your feelers can be in all these other places, but you always come back to God. So that's kind of like where I've been at. That is my understanding of all these different realities and perceptions. And that doesn't make like one better than the other, one right and one wrong, because it really depends on what reality you buy into. But at the end of the day, it's all just God. You know, God exists in all of it, in the dark and the light. And yeah, there's distorted truths, there's distorted matrices and grids that may refer to it as hijacked, but there's still, you can still see the light in it. Like, you can still shine the light in it, because that's just seeking love. That's just seeking illumination. That's just seeking purification in a sense. And so when we can look at it from this broad perspective of all of it, and it doesn't make anything right and wrong and one perspective better than the other. It just depends what lensing you're looking at it. It just depends on what direction you're looking at it from, you know? And so this is non-duality, is it all is God. It all is. And yeah, that's not to say like there's some really fucked up things going on in the world. There is some really fucked up things going on in the world. But the fucked up things that are going on in the world just is people that, you know, need to be loved, that are seeking power from dark places. It's people that have not found the love within themselves that are doing those things, you know? Yeah, so it kind of just, we have to be really good at discernment and feeling what feels good for us, what feels right, what feels true for you, what feels resonant, and allowing that to lead you right now, because we are in a time where there is so many perceptions and beliefs and teachings coming at us that, like, we don't have to pick all of them. We don't have to choose to follow all of them. You know, choose what feels good in your body and follow that. Let yourself be your own guiding compass. You know, as I've come out of this void and this spiritual ego death, you know, I've been really like, because my frequency has been so fine-tuned, I've really been able to tell what feels true for me now, what feels good for me now, and start to ground into that. What doesn't feel good to me right now is all of this talk about all of these inverted matrices and stuff. Do I believe that that exists? Sure. But I just don't sit well with it, because my body experiences such a revolting energy, or like a revolting physical response to it, that I just don't need to be taking content that speaks about it, because obviously that's just not where my vibration is at. That's just not where my work is at. That's not where I need to be. That's not the part of the ocean that I need to be focusing on. And so I also want to speak to that we really need to be learning how to, or exercising the respect for other people's free will and boundaries. You know, like, it's so easy for us to just be like exploding all of our beliefs and opinions and perspectives on people that aren't ready to receive them, or that's just not where their reality is at. And so, it can be very triggering for them or upsetting for them to have all of this information bombarded at them without consent. And so if someone is like putting boundaries on you, be like, yo, you know, let's, for example, talk about conspiracies, which I pretty heavily navigated the conspiracy bunny holes at the beginning of lockdown number 1. I think we're in lockdown number 3 here in Austria. And so I'm very aware of the information that's coming through in those bunny holes. I'm also very aware of the propaganda and the manipulation that comes through in those places. I'm not saying that conspiracies are all wrong, and I'm not saying that they're all right. I think you really need to practice discernment and feel into what feels true for you or not. And it's the same with people that are talking about all of the hijacked and the psychic entity attacks and da 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 da. If you're calling upon this being, they're actually a fallen angel, and so you're channeling dark stuff. Like, that just doesn't feel right in my being. That doesn't feel true for me, because I trust that the frequency that's coming through is pure based on my intention, and I can feel when something feels off. So I think I got off track there. Looping back to, okay, so if someone just says to you, if you're really in the conspiracy stuff right now and you're like, how can you not like see it as this, da 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 da, and someone just puts up a boundary like, hey, this conspiracy stuff, this is your truth right now, but it's not where I'm at right now. So please, like, limit how much that you're sharing with me. You have to honor that. You have to honor that, because we are in a place where we are so overstimulated by information. And if someone is putting a boundary up with you, you need to honor it, and vice versa. If you have someone coming at you with all of this stuff about conspiracies, about the hijacked stuff by, or pro-vaccine or not pro-vaccine or whatever, and it's just is becoming too much for you, you have to put a boundary and say, hey, like, I appreciate that you are so dedicated to doing your research and so committed to looking at alternative perspectives and finding what is true for you. But right now, I'm just finding that I need to be taking my own space to be really grounding into what is true for me, and having all of this information coming at me from all different places is just too much for me. It kind of like throws me off. And I just feel like this is so important to speak to it, because I have been experiencing it from numerous conversations where someone's just like giving me all of this information that I have not asked for, and it does not feel good. It feels like there are boundaries that are being crossed without me even having to put a boundary up. And then when I put a boundary up, they get crossed again. And so it's like, hey, let's just everybody chill out and give ourselves space from all of this information so we can really discern what feels true for us right now. What feels true for you is going to look totally different than what feels true to your best friend and what feels true to your family right now. So if someone's content feels off to you, pull yourself out of it, pull yourself back from it. Notice if that like stream of consciousness coming from that person, from that content you took in, feels really sticky in your field, and just see yourself like unplugging it and sending it back. Because right now you are taking in a stream of consciousness from what I'm speaking. You're taking in my soul's frequency. You're taking in, you're receiving like my energetic imprint. And so if you've made it this far, obviously you're resonating with what I'm saying. But if not, I encourage you to just turn this off and unplug yourself from this podcast, unplug yourself from this episode, or from what I'm speaking about here. Because it is kind of a really confusing time, and especially if you're experiencing something similar that what I've just been coming out of a spiritual ego death, it can be a lot. It can be a lot. And that's the thing too, is that I think I had wrote a post last week that said like the new age community is collapsing in on itself. And I wouldn't say that that's like the right way to say it. It's more so like the new age community is very much experiencing a spiritual ego death, because anywhere where teachings have gotten super diluted or taught outside of integrity or outside of lineages, or there's a lot of ego in the spiritual community of like, how clean can you eat? How long can you meditate? Breath work, da 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 da. And how pretty is your marketing? And there's all of these like hot words being used that like most people don't even know what they mean. That there's just a lot of, there's a lot of ego in the spiritual community, in the new age community. And it's like, there's certain, like, you have to think like there's certain yoga studios that you just like don't want to walk into because you know that there's so much ego around the poses and the flexibility and whether or not you had your celery green juice this morning, and oh my god, I don't watch TV. Like, you watch TV, that's not good for your brain, and all sorts of things. Whereas like, you're going to feel more comfortable to walk into a yoga studio where like there's real people there, there's authentic people there, there's moms that haven't showered yet that morning who are showing up and their hair is all frazzled and they're like, yo, I am a hot mess express today. You're going to feel more comfortable and safe with that than like this super rigidity, perfectionism that might be coming through in other yoga studios. And it's the same thing with like, coaches and healers and spiritual mentors. There's a lot of ego. And so you really need to discern whose teachings feel good, whose teachings feel real, whose teachings feel authentic, whose teachings actually feel to be of service rather than self-service. And so there's this like spiritual ego death happening in the new age community, which is why there's kind of like so much happening in the new age community right now. So yeah, if you need to like take a breather and unplug from a bit, I encourage you to do it. It's very refreshing, but it's also very, it's a full on ego death, like you kind of like have to be willing to let it all go, let God. And then once you feel like you've completely refined to your own soul's frequency, your own soul's truth, then you can start to put your feelers out there and be like, okay, yeah, you know what, this resonates, that doesn't. No, that person is speaking very heavily that is the all end all be truth, but the amount of judgment that's coming through it just doesn't feel good. So just discern, feel what's right. And yeah, I think I'm going to leave it at that. I'm actually probably going to have to listen back to this before I even put it out as live, if I do put it out as live, because I want to make sure that this is grounded and not just all over the place of my own musings. But yeah, this is kind of my own inner thought process of everything that's going on right now and where I've been. And I just want to be really transparent with my listeners of where I've been, where I am now. I would want to say I've kind of come out of the underworld and I'm in my rebirth and my rising now. I have completely simplified everything. My teachings, the words that I use, I've just like really come back to basics, and that feels really good for me right now. I've also simplified my mentorship options. I'm no longer offering what I created last year. I've just completely taken that off on my website because what I want to create this year, I want to be in alignment with where I'm at now, not in alignment with old versions of me. So yes, I'm grounding into the starseed stuff. I'm grounding into the priestess stuff. I'm grounding into the divine feminine, divine masculine stuff again. But my soul, my main kind of connection right now and my main truth, my main truth, it comes down to God and soul signature, like just being very, very authentic with my own teachings, my own soul frequency, and allowing like the currents of my soul signal to beam out into the world on the currents of my love from my heart space, and just be in a deep place of service and transparency. I'm offering my mentorship, my 3-month and 6-month mentorship containers at a very introductory price right now, just because I have been refining. And so I've like, basically I'm no longer offering my old mentorship containers. Still offering 3 and 6 months, but I'm not branding it as like Cosmic Radiance or anything like that anymore. It's just, if you want to mentor with me, we can work together for 3 or 6 months. It's intuitive. I still very much work with helping women stand in their power, giving them power upgrades, power activations, helping them to share their light, their medicine, their gifts, their magic with the world undiluted, to support them in like overcoming self-doubt and overcoming the limiting beliefs so that they can confidently just stand in their power and stand in their light so they can do what they came here to do. But like I said, I've simplified it and it feels really good. It feels really good and grounding. My nervous system was not happy last month. She was not happy at all. So the simplicity of everything now just feels very nourishing right now. And I recognize that as my languaging changes, that there are going to be people that don't resonate anymore and they're going to go on their way. And I wish you well. And thank you for being part of my journey while you were. And I'm sending you love, and I'm good either way. Like, there's no hard feelings if you're not resonating anymore. I'm going to be using God a lot more in my teachings because that feels so powerful. So powerful, and the world needs that. The world needs authenticity. Yeah, the world needs authenticity, and the world needs simplicity, and the world does not need all of these overcomplicated spiritual terms that nobody really knows what the fuck they mean, you know? So yeah, that's where I'm at. And yeah, I love you. Thank you for listening. And, you know, if you've been experiencing something similar, don't hesitate to reach out and just, yeah, we can message back and forth. I recognize how confusing it can be to just feel like everything's being stripped away. But you're not alone. And this is everyone's going to be going through this at some point in time. This is like the journey into fifth dimension and beyond. You know, we're shedding our physical limitations and the physical density, and so we're very much more operating in an ocean of energy rather than just the physicality of everything. And in these higher realms of 5D, 6D, 7D, 8D, 9D, 10D, 12D, all of them, it's a deeper connection to God, to that universal intelligence that pulses through everything. And with that dissolves out anything that was not true to God. So yeah, I think I'm gonna tie it up here. I love you. Have a great day.